Welcome back to Chaos Collectibles. So in today's video, I am going to talk about figure customizing. That's right, everybody. Customizing figures, where I started and where I am at today. So the first figure I ever customized, believe it or not, was a Remco figure back in 2002 or 2003. Around that time frame. And they were pretty simple. I used Sculpey. So it's not even a self-hardening clay. I would actually put it in boiling water when I made it. You could put it in the oven too, but that's what I started with. And I had some pretty simple figures. I think I mentioned the one, it was a wizard, where I took an Arak head, I cut out Skeletor's hood, sculpted a beard on him, kind of like the wizard that I have now, but the one that I made here a couple years ago looks much better than the original one did. I made an executioner, basically just took a figure, I think it was a Thoth Amon, and ended up sculpting an executioner hood over the top of it. Got some felt for the straps around him, things like that. And I use very cheap paints from Walmart, Folk Art paints. And some of those are they don't adhere very well. They don't go on very smooth. But that's where I started. And I want to say I probably made about 6 or 8 of them. I sold them off on eBay. Back when eBay was a lot cooler. And what I mean by cooler is they didn't charge you an arm and a leg. You didn't have to worry about things being charged as income if you sold them and stuff like that. So it was a lot easier to do stuff like that, right? So I ended up getting rid of all of those. And then I started customizing Marvel Legends figures. I think I went over this in the past. Those are really fun to customize because you put the figure in boiling water, pop the pins out, you can change, legs, things like that. 2010, I probably did about 5 or 6 of those. Go to figurerealm.com. You can see some of my stuff on there. And then I took a break from customizing. I took a break from collecting. Took a break for quite a long time. And then I come across the Zolo figures again. And had some Masters of the Universe Classics, whatever. Sold those off. Started buying Zolos. Anyhow, started customizing Zolos. So from there, what I did was just simple head swaps, paint stuff up, started sculpting a little bit, did some of the Conan figures that you see up there. This time I bought nicer paints. I bought the Vallejo paints. I showed that in a few videos. I use Vallejo paints. They're a lot better than the cheap Walmart paints. They're a little bit more expensive. They flow better. And then from there, I started to prime my figures. And I was still using Sculpey, right? Buddy of mine, Remco Custom, says that he uses Procreate Sculpt stuff. I kind of like that stuff. You can kind of mix different amounts of the hardener and the resin to get more of a rubbery feel or a harder feel. Stuff worked okay. Wasn't the best to work with, at least not in my opinion. I like how easy Sculpey is to work with, but it's so brittle and weak, and if you knock a figure down or something, there's a good chance it could break, I want something that's going to be more robust. See, there's an evolution to what's happening here. And so I did a couple figures like that. Some of the snakes, I did the necks that way with the Procreate Sculpt. Pretty much used all that stuff up. Now I have this epoxy sculpt. I've used it on a couple different figures so far. Seems to work pretty good. I did have one here though that I started sculpting traps on. And on one side, I must not have mixed it well enough or long enough or something. It feels sticky still. It feels like it's a little bit soft, where this side's hard as a frickin' rock. So that's what happens when you customize. I've ruined so many figures. I bought a bunch of stuff I couldn't use, but I hold on to everything just in case I can use it at a later date. But yes, you have to expect to destroy stuff sometimes. It happens. Things don't always work out the way you're planning, but it's all a trial and error process. So then from there, I started to use this. Just started to use this recently. So now I go from Sculpey, Procreate Sculpt to Epoxy Sculpt. This stuff's probably 20 or 30 bucks for this. I mean, this is gonna last me quite a while, right? I mean, there's a whole pound of stuff right here, you know, 8 ounce, mix them equal parts and mix them for a few minutes. It's a little sticky at first. And then go from not priming figures to priming figures, go from using crap paint to using good paint, okay? So now, swapping heads, things like that, you know, and then I started to go on to the 3D heads. First 3D printed head I used, trying to think. I want to say it was probably the Pirate that I did last year. The Captain one, right? He actually has the same shoulder armor as Gundahar that I just made, using this guy right here. So it's always good to come across figures, look around, have a vision, right? And you can come across figures and steal some of their stuff, you know? Steal Mythic Legion's shoulder armors and things like that, you know? I started to like make some of my own chest armors and things like that from old school figure chest armors, or just getting stuff at Joann Fabrics and making stuff, you know? The Gundahar cape is just the same material that I bought for Thulsa Doom's cape. Buy these things, you know, 1 foot by 3 foot piece for 10 bucks or whatever, and you have plenty. And then from there, I started to play around with something else. Oh yeah, sealing figures, right? I did seal the Gundahar figure. I got about 5 or 6 figures that I've sealed anymore. I use Mod Podge to seal my figures, right? Always trying to improve, always trying to do better. So this is the matte finish, which I think works perfect for these type of figures. I mean, I barely used any of this. This stuff can last me years. However, it's not as good of a protectant as you may think. In fact, my Gorilla figure that I made fell off my shelf about a year ago, and it took the paint right off the shoulder. So what do I need to do now? I need to touch that spot up with that gray black, go over it with this again. However, it does help as far as just paint coming off your figures, right? Handling them and the paint coming off. If it falls, you're gonna have to touch that sucker up. But if it's just handling it, things like that, moving the joints around, it should hold pretty good. And then, this stuff here is like magic, and I'm gonna have to buy more of it. I forgot I even had it. I used it on a couple figures back in the day, probably about a year ago. Really liked the way it worked. And then I started to customize figures here a couple weeks ago. I'm like, man, I'm struggling with the freaking eyes. What the heck is going on here? You know, I'm trying to think of what I did in the past, right? Right there, folks. This stuff is freaking magical. Yes. So what you do is you take this and you just put a little bit in your tray. And then you take your paint, put a little bit on there too. And you just mix just a little bit of this with your paint. And what that does is it helps the paint, thins the paint, helps it flow better than just using water. So this is the golden frickin' ticket to doing eyes. So when I did Gundahar's eyes, I did the green. I mixed both of those colors together, or this with the green. Tested it, and it made a nice dot. Perfect. Where if you use water and you water it down too much, that stuff's gonna start to bleed out, right? And then it just starts to like get all over everything. So boom, eyeball, right? And then from there, did it with the black, boom, boom, pupil. And then I got the white, did the same thing, boom, boom, little reflective frickin' dot. Worked out pretty frickin' good. This stuff is magical, folks. This can change the game in your painting for sure. Love this stuff. So I always think it's a good idea to try to, you know, build a community as far as helping other people and, you know, what they're customizing if they decide to do so themselves. But keep in mind, customizing is very expensive, okay? So let's just do the rundown on Gundahar and what everything cost me, right? Well, you have the head, and then you have the shipping cost. If I were to just buy that head would have cost me like 35 bucks because of the shipping costs that came along with it. But I bought several heads, but then I ended up buying the shoulder pauldrons that I couldn't use, right? You're always running into these things. At least I do, right? So we'll just say $25 head. This figure here was about 15 or 20 bucks shipped. We'll say 20 bucks shipped to me, okay? For the shoulder armor and then the cape thing that I used on the back. When I bought this figure, I just knew I wanted the shoulder armor off it. In fact, I used that leg peg from the other one I got for that other pirate that I did. So then you have the cost of the actual figure. We'll say, maybe I spent 20, 25 bucks on that figure, right? Mike might have had a sale or something, and I, probably picked one up or something at Christmas time. Be a little modest on that. And then I have the trap jaw belt. I remember buying that belt because I ended up buying 2 of them. You get them on eBay, they're about 10 bucks a pop. So what are we at now? 25 head, 20 for this, that's 45. Zolo, 25. We're at 65 now. Trap jaw belt, 75. 75 bucks. And then by the time you get the boot covers, there's another 15 bucks, right? I'm at $90 right now. 90 bucks. And that's not including the sword or any of the other stuff, right? But we'll say $90 into that figure right there. Customizing, especially when you have a clear vision in mind on what parts you want to use from what figures, can be pretty expensive, right? But when you buy stuff like this, look, I can still use another hook for another pirate. I can use a peg leg for another pirate. So I always try to think of things like that. When I buy something, I pick it up, Who knows? Maybe this red thing right here could be used for something, right? I don't know. So it's always good to hold on to stuff because you never know what parts you're going to use off something. So another thing is attaching heads, right? I didn't do that before. This is another thing, using magnets to attach the heads, right? This is an example right here of one that I did, and I just kind of sculpted a neck on there because I was actually going to use this as an elephant, but the elephant head was too small. I got the ogre scale way too big. So now I got to figure out, well, I'd still like to use this guy, but I got to cut all that crap off it, I got to take it, grind it down, cut it off, whatever the case may be, so I could put a different head on there. And then attaching heads. So I have this guy here. I'm actually going to start him soon. At least the idea is. I really like that head. The bowl cut's awesome. He's bald on top. I mean, this thing is freaking awesome. It's going to be one of Gundahar's buddies there, right? Or whatever the case may be. So we have a Zolo here. But see, you always run into different obstacles. You never know what you're going to come into, right? So 1, the neck peg does not fit into the head. 2, if you go straight up from here, look at. So the back of this neck is going to stick out farther than the back of his head with his beard touching the front of the neck. So some serious mods need to be done sometimes. And this is the types of things that I run into because a lot of these 3D printed heads are made for figures like Mythic Legions, Marvel Legends, things like that. I just have people scale them up for me. So I'm going to have to figure out a way to do that. So neck peg is getting cut off, which is going to make it a little bit tougher for this figure to have a functional head. So I have a couple options. I can make it a fixed head, or I can use the magnets, right? Because I started to use magnets a while back on some of the figures where I run into issues like this. So what I'm going to have to do with this is I can drop the head down, but I'm going to have to sculpt his neck a little bit forward so he's kind of like this, right? In order for that to work. And I may potentially have to grind down the front of this neck, especially if I want it to be functional. And how functional is it going to be when the beard's so big it's going to hit the chest. So I got some figuring out to do. So I just do first things first, right? You got to figure these things out as you go, right? You have to be adaptable when it comes to certain situations and how to make things work. So I got to cut this down, put the head on, see how the beard interferes with the neck before I even grind that down. But the first thing I got to do is just cut that off. I do that with a lot of these to make these heads work. Sometimes I even bore the hole out bigger like I did on the Hulk. I had to bore the Hulk's hole bigger so that the neck peg could fit in there. Sometimes I'll go over the neck peg with a piece of paper, sculpt all around it. That way the piece of paper keeps separation between this and the sculpt, because the sculpting compound can be pretty sticky sometimes. And then boom, what happens? It's a fixed head. So I try to make all the heads functional, but that's not always possible. At least not in a way that I could find, right? There may be different ways of doing things, but I've learned all of this pretty much through trial and error on my own. So I think videos like this are pretty important. They may be a little lengthy, but at least I can give some of you who look to customize figures in the future maybe some ideas and maybe save you some headache on how to do some of this stuff, because it can be a headache sometimes, you know. Although I enjoy it, there's a lot of figuring, you know. Sometimes you run into frustrating things. So I got to figure out a way to make this work, because I definitely want to use that head. I think it's awesome, right? Freaking cool. So I'm just not sure if I'm going to use a body, a regular Zolo. I was hoping to use this because it's a little bit taller. Have like a taller freaking, you know, henchman or whatever, you know. So I have that there. And then, of course, I've got this guy. This one seems to work out a little better, right? I can just sculpt a neck on this. I know I can make this functional. And what I did is I got a little bit of that Sculpey, and I just shoved it up into his head to make it kind of fit on her. But this is the Orc. So with this guy here, I shouldn't have many issues at all. Use that paper over the peg method, sculpt around it, and then take the head off as it cures. And then that way pop it back on and make sure it's functional. You have a functional head on this guy here. So that's the idea for this. I am going to take some pictures of Gundahar and send them out to my buddy Paris, who ended up making these heads for me. Show him how they turned out. And he's on vacation right now, so he's got a deal. 20% off heads right now, which is pretty freaking cool. So I might look on there and just place an order, put a note in there and say, hey, contact me about sizing, and once you get ready to do these, and we'll figure it out. So very freaking cool. Awesome Orc, but I think I'm just getting to the point now where I'm rambling. But I hope this was helpful to some of you guys. I just kind of wanted to hop on here and just kind of show you the evolution, or my personal evolution, through customizing figures. I should have planned this video out a little bit better, but it's just kind of done on a whim. And then I should have showed you, you know, some of the different figures that I've done, which I'm sure you've seen over the you know, the last couple of years, those that have been watching me for a little bit. I can always go into, you know, I got a playlist on there. I still got to add some of these other customs to it, but there is a playlist, custom figure playlist on there, where you can kind of go back and see some of the earlier customs that I've done a few years back. But as of right now, I mean, I'm at over 30 customs over the last couple of years that I've done. So that number should grow. And the thing is, you just get a little burnout sometimes. You know, I ended up doing a couple customs for this dude last year when I was kind of on a roll. And I cranked out 2 in a weekend. And I think I only did like 1 or 2 after that, up until the end of last year. By that time, between working as much as I was and everything, I was just freaking cooked. I just needed to get away for a little while, take a break from it, because it can be a lot of work. Although I enjoy it, once it becomes a job, that's when you have to kind of just step back for a minute, you know? I love to create things. I love to customize figures. I like to have, you know, come up with my own characters and stuff like that. It's really fun. And now that I have a source for humans, because I do like beasts and stuff, but the human characters are always my favorite. I love barbarians. I think they're awesome. Favorite character of all time is Conan. So really cool to be able to make human freaking figures like this. I think they're freaking awesome. So again, I'm rambling now. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I know this is a lengthy ass video, but if you have any questions about customizing, I'm not saying I'm going to have your answer, but that community of helping each other out, I think is freaking awesome. And that's one of the reasons I made this channel, right? So if you have any questions or any ideas about customizing, hit me up in the comments. We can discuss it. And yeah, hopefully this video's helped you out. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. I hope you all have an awesome day. Until next time. Woo!